Hello everybody. How are you? I'm Pamela Coons at the Wellness Radio TV. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are. I am really honored today to have as my guest Dr. Marsha Morris. Dr. Marsha Morris is a psychiatrist. She is on the faculty
Yes,
staff at the University of Florida here in Gainesville, and has written a book about the psychological health of our young people, and a problem that she says has grown since she wrote the book 2 years ago. Dr. Morris, thank you very much for being a guest here at the Wellness Network.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about, hello everybody that's joining, Bernard, Miss Green, Miss Payne. We really appreciate you all joining, and share this. We're going to be talking about young people coming back home. How do you manage that? Or young adults who have, or don't have to be young adults, but people moving back home, living with their parents for various reasons, cost of living, whatever the issue might be, but cohabitating with adults under one roof, two women in one kitchen can be a mess, as we've often heard. But also the emotional well-being of young people. They go off to college and then they come home, and they may be carrying more than their suitcases when they walk through the door. They're carrying some emotional baggage, some stress. Hey, Warhol and James Williams. So, Doctor, thank you again for being here. Why? First of all, she's the author of the book called The Campus Cure. Let's talk about, why did you decide to write this book to begin with?
Well, I wanted to write something for parents because parents don't often know what to do when their college students have a mental health problem. And I wanted to give hope to parents to see that there is help for kids on campus or off campus, but that it's critical to get them help if they're experiencing a mental health problem. And unfortunately, mental health problems, especially depression and anxiety, have gone up very much so in the last decade on campus.
So here we are as parents, we get our children ready, they graduate from high school, we get them ready for college, and sometimes you feel like, but it's not done. And it may be just the beginning, because many times this is the time frame with young people that mental health issues start to show up.
Right, and you make an excellent point. 3/4 of mental health problems will appear by age of 24 if someone's going to have a problem. So we have that factor, plus students seem to be experiencing more mental health problems at a younger age. And I think a lot of this is related to what I call the pressure of perfectionism. Perfectionism has actually gone up among college students, where they feel the pressure to be perfect academically, socially, and financially. So they're coming with this pressure. So if they get a B or a C or an F, it's devastating to them. Whereas when I was in college, you failed or got a C, you worked harder and moved forward. For kids nowadays, it sometimes feels like that's the end of the world. And parents need to help give kids perspective that it's not the end of the world when these things happen.
We are talking to Dr. Marsha Morris. She is a psychiatrist and the author of a book called The Campus Cure, a guide for parents. Now, when you have these students, they've gone off to college, they're coming home for the holidays. What we're going to talk about in this segment, we're going to talk more about the mental health or the instability of young people today who may be at college, and some of the signs that you need to watch for. But hey, Kathy Mercer and Cleo Jenkins, what are some of the things that parents, the child walks through the door, you dropped off your baby, they walk through the door, and now they're grown.
Right.
And they're not interested in you telling them what time they need to be home. How do we navigate that?
Well, here's my first bit of advice, and this goes for any well, I'm going to use an acronym called EAT, E-A-T.
E-A-T, okay,
and since
write
we're
that down.
eating, since this is the holidays and kids are home for the holidays and we eat a lot on the holidays, that's a good way to remember it. The first step is to enjoy the time with your child, because in order to have a good relationship, we have to have positivity in the relationship. And if we are going to give constructive criticism, we've got to have that initial positivity. So make sure you're doing things you enjoy doing with your child. It might be taking a walk or working out or watching a funny show, but make sure you have that enjoyment. Don't come down on them right away if there's something you're unhappy about. You've got to have that bond there. So enjoy is the first thing. And then the second thing I would say, the A part, is acknowledge. This is part of the positivity. Acknowledge that their strengths. Wow, I'm excited to hear what you're telling me about classes, or wow, you look different. I like the way you change your hair, or just acknowledge what you see as positive.
Don't acknowledge that you see the freshman 10.
Right, don't ever acknowledge that.
The freshman 10
don't
pounds that we all gain.
Right, but if, again, model, if the child has gained weight, just model good behaviors, have healthy meals, and take walks with your child. But yeah, I mean, when sometimes students lose weight, sometimes they gain weight as they're adjusting to college food. And then the other thing is acceptance, because what happens sometimes is students come home with very different views. And I'll bring up the hot topic issue, politics. There's a big generation gap between parents and kids in terms of their political views. And so I would actually suggest avoiding the topic of politics or listening, because the last thing, there's so much discord and arguing about politics and families. And I think we all need to be better listeners and hear each other's views. So acceptance. And then the last thing is the T, take action. And this is different from the other things I've just mentioned, but if you see a major problem going on, for example, if your child comes home and they failed all their classes, or they've gotten all C's, that's something you want to have a dialogue about in a non-judgmental way, say, oh, well, hopefully they didn't get all F's, but let's say they got all C's. Let's talk about this semester. What can you do to improve? Because we know you might have been an all A or all B student in high school. So talking about that and addressing the problems. And if there are mental health problems, talking about it, asking if they're feeling depressed, getting them help over the winter break, which can be 3 or 4 weeks sometimes. And if they seem to be having mental health problems like anxiety or depression, making sure they get help when they get back on campus. That's critical.
Dr. Morris, a psychiatrist at the University of Florida, practicing psychiatrist as well as a professor there, and the author of a book called The Campus Cure, the acceptance that you talked about. There are so many things as parents, and I have a 23-year-old. There's so many things as parents. They can go off to college, and they might have been going to Sunday school when you dropped them off at college, and come home and decide they don't believe in God.
And that is happening across the board with students not feeling as closely affiliated with a religious group. And I don't have a great answer for that. It's tough when you raise your kid a certain way, but you can talk about what's meaningful for you. But I've seen a lot of that with young adults, where there's a lack of belief in either religion or God. And again, I'm open to everyone's views. The thing I get concerned about is when sometimes the spirituality can be protective in terms of the times when people feel very depressed or even feel like harming themselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying everyone has to be religious, but I think there are some protective elements, and also being part of a social group can be good. So if my patients have some religious feeling, I'll encourage them to join their affiliated groups on campus, because that can be a great source of support. But it's something that I don't have a great answer about how to deal with that other than the acceptance part.
Well, as parents, what do you suggest parents do? Because, as I had one lady talk about her daughter coming home, and, her whole demeanor toward her was different. Like, really? You're expecting me to do whatever? And, parents, you really have a lot more power than you think, because more times than not, they're still in your pocket.
And you're talking about setting boundaries. And also, their behavior in any relationship, whether it's a child and a parent or spouses, there needs to be respect. So I've seen people accept less respectful behavior than parents when I was growing up did. And again, we have to set the expectations and say, if a child is expressing themselves in a way that's hurtful, say, I feel hurt when you say that to me. You can have your own beliefs, but I want you to respect my beliefs too. Like if they start criticizing your beliefs, or saying, I think we need to end the discussion now.
How much of this kind of conversation needs to happen? Because I think parents get caught off guard. You take one person to college and then another person comes home. It still looks like your child, but it's a different person that comes back in the door after being at college from, the start of school. They're coming home maybe Thanksgiving break and definitely this Christmas break. What do you say to parents to be prepared, or how do you have those discussions before you take the child to college? Whatever the curfew was when you left, that's the curfew when you come back. I'm still the parent when you come back, and God blessed me with whatever I have. So if you want what God blessed me with to bless you, then you need to. Yeah. I mean, talk to people about how you do that.
And actually, in the book, I actually cover both academics and financial pressures, and how parents. It is important for parents to talk about expectations in both areas before the child goes off to school. So for academics, I would suggest parents encourage, ideally A's and B's, but there are going to be some C's or even F's, but talking about this is what, I'm expecting, but if you're having problems, let me know, but also use the resources on campus, use the tutoring center, go to the professor's office hours, but don't wait till the end of the semester. So I want you to be proactive. And what I would say, parents should even go on the website and look up the tutoring services. They do this during orientation, but parents can talk about how there's actually a high rate of people dropping out freshman year. I feel like it might be a fourth or a third or something.
Really?
So parents need to say, listen, college is really, really different from high school, and you need to use all the different services. Don't overload yourself with tough classes. The worst thing a parent can do is say, I expect you to get all A's. I expect you to take hard science classes and go to medical school. And I've seen that end of things too, where a kid isn't even interested in science and they're majoring in a science and they do poorly. So you have to know your child, but you also have to set reasonable expectations, because again, if they're getting all C's every semester, you may not want to help pay for that if you're helping pay for their school. They may need a gap year to kind of work and gain more responsibility. So I think, again, the finances are tied in with the academics. You want them to meet some minimal requirements, but finances are another story too, because if some kids are on their own on scholarship, even then I think parents need to supervise, because kids will sign for leases that are too expensive. They don't have the experience to always make good choices. So that first year, parents really need to be involved in financial decisions, and also make sure that kids aren't overspending.
We're talking to Dr. Marsha Morris, who is the author of Campus Cure, and she is part of the faculty at the University of Florida here in Gainesville. We're talking about children coming home for the holidays, young adults moving in with parents for various reasons. Do you find that parents are carrying too much guilt about what's going on with their children? Or, how do we let go? How do we start to allow them to be whoever they came here to be, and relinquish ourselves from the guilt of, oh my God, my child did this, my child did that, and what people might think, or any of that kind of stuff?
That pressure of perfectionism falls on parents too. And we know about that college scandal, the Varsity Blues scandal, where parents paid huge sums of money to get and bribe people to get their kids into top schools. So parents, it seems like a societal trend that parents care very much about what others think and almost wanting to do too much for their child. That's an example of going overboard and doing too much.
Yeah.
So we don't want to do that, but we want to provide guidance, but we also, we have to pick and choose our battles. So for me, I had discussions with my kids. I expect this minimum of grades. And I talked very clearly about drugs and alcohol and what my expectations were. No drugs. And then alcohol is a tricky issue because it's not legal till you're 21, yet 2/3 of students have had alcohol in the last month. So you would probably encourage your kid not to drink, but you also would want to talk about safe drinking too in case they do. Because again, 2/3 are drinking. That's the reality.
So the acronym for you to keep in mind as your young people that look like the people you took to college come back through the door and they're really somebody else, EAT.
Right.
So what does the acronym
So
say?
enjoy.
Enjoy them. First of all, do your best to enjoy them.
Acknowledge their strengths and accept the changes you see.
Okay.
And the last is take action if you notice any serious academic, financial, or emotional issues.
Yeah, so I think the most difficult part for parents is to look at the acceptance. And your child may come back home and they might have been heterosexual when they left. Mm-hmm. So talk about how parents are having to deal with children who come home and they've decided that what they want to do is same-sex relationships.
Right, and I have a chapter covering cultural.
You have a whole chapter.
Cultural challenges, but
it's backwards, but it's.
But anyways, there's a lot more fluidity now. When I say fluid, like even changes day to day in sexuality, meaning sexual preference, like who people want to date or have intimacy with. And also in gender, which is actually different from sexuality. It's who you feel you are. Do you feel you're more masculine? Do you feel you're more feminine? Do you feel you're a combination? Or do you feel you might have been born assigned a male, but you might feel more like a female? This, interestingly enough, we've always had people who've been bisexual, gay, and also we've had people who've been transgender where they feel like they're not the gender they were born to. This has always been present, but there's also been a lot of negative feelings towards those situations. And the issue, I see it as a biological phenomenon influenced by social factors. There's always, in every culture, there are people who are gay and transgender. In some cultures, it's accepted more than in others. In some cultures, there might be higher rates, but a lot of it, there have been studies showing some of the brains of people who are gay, there might be differences, but again, these are small studies, so there are psychological, social, and biological factors that influence these things. Yeah.
A lifeline to parents who see this and are struggling with, oh my goodness, I didn't expect this.
And the hardest
What do you say to parents? How do they manage that?
Well,
speak to them and their emotions.
Most parents manage it fine. They actually, there's always an element of shock, like not always, but sometimes there's an element of shock. Sometimes parents know this about their kids, but often even for parents who accept that some people are gay or transgender, even for those people, it's a challenge. It always is. They worry about their child being accepted. So it's okay to acknowledge that you're having some challenges with it, even if you accept it in other people. And it can sometimes help to talk to a therapist if you're feeling challenged.
Yeah.
And there are websites. One is called GLAAD, G-L-A-A-D, and there are other websites for family members. There's something called PFLAG. There are websites for family members and friends of people who are gay or transgender. So just getting information. There are some religions that are saying that gay acts or being transgender is sinful. And that's that's where I see parents face the most challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen parents kind of figure this out where they can still be loving and accepting, but in their hearts they don't like the behavior. But one thing I'm going to say is gay and transgender people have a much higher rate of depression and suicide than non-gay and non-transgender people. So I say that to parents because even if there are some religious beliefs against it, it's really important to love your child, however you love them, because if you reject them, there's truly a hazard to their health. Even if you don't like that behavior, I would encourage parents to speak with their spiritual advisor or speak with a therapist. Find a way to show love to them, because I've seen people who are devastated by the rejection of their parents for their lifestyle.
I remember I got married my freshman year of college.
Oh my gosh! Wow. That's young.
See? And so it was scary to think about telling my mother and my father that I was already married. So and marrying a man is an acceptable union. So for young people who are having to come home and make this announcement to their parents that they are gay, so they're feeling what they're having to feel, and then you point out that there's a higher rate of depression and anxiety, and then having to deal with parents who may be responding in a way that adds to it. But parents have their feelings too.
Right, and that again, parents worry about their kids, and they this is one thing I see all the time of parents envisioning their kids' life one way and it becomes another way.
Right.
And we all go through this. I have kids in their 20s, and you have this urge to control things and make their life go a certain path, and sometimes it doesn't. But you need to find a way to maintain that loving relationship. But again, there also has to be respect. You need to show respect to your child, but your child needs to show respect. And there's a coarsening of our culture and the way people talk to each other nowadays. And we need to move back to using respectful and kind language to each other.
That's a way to put it, Dr. Morris. A coarsening. That's called being downright disrespectful of your parents. And that's just, I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are. Your parents are, the first adults in your life. And it's amazing that children think it's okay to disrespect their parents, and then they go to school and they can be respectful of teachers, or sometimes they exhibit those same kind of behaviors. Parents, what we're allowing children to do at home, they will take it somewhere else, right?
Right, and I think we're over-focused on academics when we're raising kids and not focused enough on kindness and having good values. I think this comes out of economic anxiety from parents. We had that horrible recession between 2006 and 2008. So parents just want their kids to do well and be able to take good care of themselves. But we need to keep in mind the values of being kind and loving, and that's just as important as how you do academically. It's actually more important. That is the most important thing, how we treat each other.
Because that's part of your character. And that will carry over in your interaction with your teachers. And then when you get your first job, young adults, if you haven't learned how to respect your parents and respect your teachers, people do not have to put up with you, while your parents may have been willing to pay and deal with your behavior. The workforce is not.
That's 100% correct. Even I've seen kids who've misbehaved in high school and they get to college, they don't last very long, or they just haven't had good behaviors. In college, the professors expect a certain level of respect. And
they should.
And of course, yes. And so I'll talk about one group of people who sometimes have trouble with communication. Those are young adults with autism, where they tend to not always see things from other people's perspectives or express things in a way that can be jarring. Like I've heard of students where a professor will say something that's inaccurate and they'll correct them in class. They don't realize that socially maybe they should have gone to the professor afterwards. So with kids, if you have a child with autism, it's really important to connect them with services on campus, because they might need some extra help in how they communicate with professors. Most schools have something called the Disability Resource Center. So kids with ADHD and kids with autism, they get some extra help in terms of, they might get, if they need it, like with ADHD, they might get extra time for tests, or with autism, they might get some coaching on how to communicate with professors.
Yeah.
But so there are some instances where kids don't mean to be disrespectful. Like the kids with autism don't mean it. They just don't. They don't. Their communication skills need work. They might be a little behind with their communication skills.
Yeah. How you doing, Frances Poe, my sister in Harvest, Alabama, and Patricia Cole. I really appreciate all of you all watching this, because it may have been you having to move back home or going back home from college, or you may have a child or children who move back home. I'm talking to Dr. Marsha Morris. Dr. Marsha Morris is a professor at the University of Florida and also the author of a book called Campus Cure. I moved back home for about 2 weeks, in between renovating a house, and moved back to Jackson, Tennessee, and hey, Sylvia James. But I'm telling you, I still ask if I wanted to get something out of the refrigerator because it's not my food. And my mother raised us that way. However, I would ask her, and she'd say, well, you don't have to ask me that. Well, yes, I do, because that's how you raised me.
Right.
And I'm not going to walk in somebody else's house and go in their refrigerator and get what I want. Nor should you do that, even if you're at your parents', because I don't know, she might have bought this juice to go in a cake or something. I don't know. So for me to just go in and get it, and just as what you talk about, just the behavior of being respectful to everybody. Yourself first, but just to be respectful. Now, Dr. Morris, talk about children, adult children who have to move back home. How does that dynamics look for parents and for those adult children who have to move back home for various reasons?
Well, I'll talk first about what I see, and luckily I don't see it too often, but sometimes college students need to take time away from school. So let's say they have a severe mental health problem and they just need more time off to recover. I will recommend parents, number one, make sure they have therapy and psychiatric services set up at home. But number two, encourage their child to be doing productive things. And it might, if they have a severe mental health problem, it might be going to an outpatient program. Or it might be doing, if they aren't having mental health issues, they still need to be volunteering and or working.
How do you get somebody to volunteer if they're in the room and the door is closed? How are you going to get somebody to come out and do something? Is that setting the parents up for a battle? I mean, how do you get through that?
That is, if let's say you do have a child who isn't coming out or is having a mental health issue and won't get help, my advice to parents is to seek mental health services themselves to work on this issue, because that is the toughest thing a parent faces. If you have a child under 18, you can compel them and force them to get help.
Right.
Once they turn 18, they're legally adult. They're still considered adolescents biologically and psychologically until they're 25. So you might have a child who's struggling emotionally or just going through a tough time, and that they're in that in-between phase where you can't compel them. We talked a little bit before about an organization called NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. If your child is having that mental health problem and they're not engaging in treatment and not responding to you, I highly recommend parents join this group. It's NAMI.org, NAMI.org. You can find your local chapter, but parents have gone through similar experiences, and parents can advise each other. How do you handle this situation? How do you engage your child? but it is heartbreaking when you can't. But I don't want anyone to give up hope, because you can work with these other parent groups to get advice and help. But you brought up the guilt issue, which I didn't answer before.
Okay.
Don't feel guilty. We're all
It's
doing
hard.
our best as parents.
Yeah.
Parents should not feel guilty. They you know, we all make mistakes as parents, and we often don't know if we even made mistakes or not. But sometimes whatever we've done, our kid will have a problem. They might fail out of school. They might have a mental health problem. We seek solutions. We problem solve. We don't blame. We try to assess what's going on and how can we move forward. But the guilt can really get in the way, and it can keep the child from opening up to the parents, because they know the parents feeling upset or guilty. The guilt needs to go away, and we need to, it's hard though, but we need to seek resources and talk with others.
Yeah. Tony Baker, hello, thank you for joining. Listen, we're having this conversation, and just all kinds of thoughts running through my head as a mother of a 23-year-old, and have a lot of nieces and nephews. And then, I'm the 11th of 13 children.
Wow.
So,
Yes.
some of us have had to move back home for various reasons. And just trying to navigate that, especially this time of year. There's a lot of stress with the holidays anyway.
Oh, yes. And there's a lot of pressure to have that wonderful, perfect family holiday. I just read an article this morning about dealing with narcissistic relatives, like someone who might be bullying or, hard to be around. And it talks about you're not going to change some of these relatives, but,
Okay.
Step away if they are out of line. Don't let them get you into an argument. And there are some instances where if someone is verbally or abusive, you may not want to be around them. But if someone's physically abusive in any way, you shouldn't be with them. That should never be tolerated. Verbal abuse shouldn't necessarily be tolerated either, but there are different definitions, and sometimes you might not want to be away from the whole family due to one person. So these are very difficult issues, but again, I encourage the young adults I work with to make the decisions that work for them.
Well, talk to our parents and our children, because, it may be children coming home to difficult situations with difficult parents. It's not always that the child is difficult. Their parents that can be difficult too. How well does silence work? I mean, just electing to not participate in the conversation. How do we get to the place where we hear other people's words and we step back? We don't take ownership of what their words are intended to make us feel, and to be able to step back and see them and not respond. Help us do that.
Well, that's challenging, especially if they say something that's offensive. And we've had these articles written about people saying things, and do you correct them if they say something that you consider that's prejudiced or awful? Those are separate things, but I actually believe in educating people in those instances in a calm way. But if there are people that are always trying to provoke you in some ways, there are some situations that can't be changed. The tough thing is for a child who goes home to parents whom they're financially dependent on. And, so again, if there's any physical hitting, the child needs to just get out of that situation. But there's that balancing act of how much to listen to, how much does a child just kind of go along with parents are saying. I want parents and kids to be open with each other. I encourage that. I've had patients who are failing and they don't want their parents to know, because parents don't get the report cards anymore. The students have to tell them or give them access. They got to go home and tell them? Yeah. Or they can give them access. There is a way parents can have electronic access if the student signs a form. I want, in an ideal world, and the world isn't ideal, but in an ideal world, I like openness between parents and students. And I've had parents who fail, who think their parents are going to be horrified and angry and mean. And parents are usually very loving and supportive and just want what's best for their children.
Right. Talking to Dr. Marcia Morris. She is a psychiatrist and on staff at the University of Florida and has written a book about the campus cure, about a parent's guide. You say that there is an overwhelming, increasing need for psychiatric care for college students. As I mentioned earlier, we feel like we get our children, we graduate them from high school, we get the car or whatever it is that we do for them, and we get them in college, and we think that we have them on the road to wellness, on the road to success. What do you, and the pressure of being perfect, you say, is driving that huge, that along with what else is helping to drive the increase in mental illness on college campuses? And the suicide rate is up. The suicide rate is up across the country on college campuses. We don't hear about it on the news because we don't report that, because we don't want copycats, and a crime has not been committed, so we don't know how many children are committing suicide. What do you see as the driving force with that?
Well, and just to give a statistic, we know the rate of suicides in, let's say, the 15 to 24 age group, they may or may not be in college, that's tripled from the 1950s. But it's even gone up in the last 20 years. It's now, for that age group, it's at a rate of 14 out of 100,000 per year. So if you're on a campus, of 50,000, you could theoretically, there might be, well, it may not be a campus, but if there's a group of 50,000 young adults, there could be 7 suicides in that cohort. So the problem is we don't have good data about colleges, because sometimes the colleges don't count as a suicide over winter break or over the summer. So we don't.
If it's not on campus, they don't count.
Yeah, so we don't know for sure what the rate is on campuses, but we do know for this age group it has gone up, and I think I've seen statistics, it's gone up around 50% in the last 10 years, and that's alarming. And the suicide rate for people younger has increased. So we said, what is driving this? We don't know 100% for sure, but we do know rates of perfectionism has gone up. We also know social media has caused dramatic changes in how we live and conduct our lives, and a lot of people think that children and young adults are spending too much time on social media. And actually, I read a study that said, college students, if we limit social media use to half an hour a day, mood improves and depression lessens.
Really?
So, to all parents out there, now I know that's hard to do. I had my kids during the video game era, but we have to at least make the effort to limit social media use, because we want them interacting face to face.
And with each other and with you.
Right.
When you go out to eat, you see people, a couple may be at the table and they're just doing this.
And I mentioned the perfectionism as a driving force of, what I think could be contributing to the high rates of mental health issues. Loneliness is another big issue, because again, we know for a fact students have less face-to-face contact and more social media use. So they need that social connections, meeting with people face-to-face, having friends, belonging to groups, that actually improves mental health. We know this, there have been studies, and increases longevity. We live longer. We're nourished by our social connections. Yeah. I mentioned a third factor. I mentioned social issues and perfectionism and academics. Financial issues are a big issue too, and there's a lot of financial pressure because of the high cost of college and high rate of student loans. I think there's $1.3 trillion outstanding in student debt right now.
Wow.
That's a lot of pressure for our young adults.
Right, and I read a story about that the young adults now who have children who are ready to go to college, so in your 40s, you could have a child going to college, but they can't even sign for their children to get a loan to go to college because both parents have so much college debt.
Yes, and I think that's got to change.
It's
We've
got to
have a better system, because that puts a lot of burden on people.
It's the holidays, happy holidays, happy holidays. So we've talked about, I want to give you a word of encouragement, as we are in the holiday season, and I trust that wherever you are and whatever you're doing, whatever state that you're in, that you will, as I will say many times, concentrate on your breath. Just be happy that you're here, and start a gratitude journal. You know, your children are home. Children, happy that you have a home to go to, and if we could just concentrate on all of the things that we are so grateful for and so thankful for, and reduce the amount of time that we look at things to be miserable about.
And even when we do face problems, always have hope. Don't give up. That's what I want to give that message. Like, even if a child has mental health issues, there is treatment. Sometimes it's hard to access, but there's a way to work with the system and try to get your family members help. And just focus, like you said, focus on wellness. Breathe, meditate, do yoga, but take good care of yourselves. Especially the holiday season can be stressful, so this is a time to focus on your self-care.
And speaking of finances, the expectation of having to give so much, or even to get, if we would just be thankful to be here, just thankful to be alive, and lose all of those expectations that put that extra pressure on us to live up to the commercials that we see on television, the Hallmark cards. It's because we do have a lot to be thankful for. So what is your parting piece of advice, Dr. Morris, to parents with children, whether adults or older, or just getting along with people in general? I think that practice would just help across the board, even with people that you work with.
Well, I'll talk about parent-child relationships, but it applies to everyone, especially even work situations. But love your kids. And I feel that way about work. If work is best if it's like a family, and you do love people. Also, let go. Don't try to micromanage everything. And again, that applies to families and work. But set the third L, so love, let go, set limits. And with your families, there are some behaviors we have to push back on and say, no, I don't feel good when you do that. And it's the same with the workplace too. We have to function in a workplace, you have to have respect and some love at work. I mean, again, you may not want to reveal everything to who you work with, but you want to like the people you work with. It makes a big difference.
And like the people that you work with, and like the person in the mirror.
That's where it starts. And that's where we have to be grateful, have the gratitude, and also don't be so hard on ourselves. Let's focus on our strengths as well.
Well, Dr. Marsha Morris, I thank you very much for coming and spending some time with us here at the Wellness Radio TV. I thank you all for watching and listening. We will continue. I have another wonderful interview coming up later on this week. I do hope that you will join us at the Wellness Radio TV, as well as on our Facebook page. Please like and share with other friends and family members that you know who are in the midst of what they may be feeling anxious about, even before the child comes home, even before the student comes home. So, let that go, let your expectations go, and just listen. Don't take it personal. That's a lot, isn't it? Yeah, so, and just as the doctor recommended, just love on them. Thank you. Thank you all for watching. I'm Pamela Coons at the Wellness Radio TV. Remember, there is healing at the well. Please like and share, and we'll see you next time. Take care.